What's up everybody, this is Ven, and I welcome you to the MoC Spotlight where we take apart what you build. For today's episode we'll be going over Selpurus, the Lamia, posted on our message boards and created by Dagarak the Melon Knight. Now before we really kick this off, I just want to start out by saying, those of you with early access, you guys have one more week to create a shark MoC, as I announced in the previous MoC Spotlight that I will be on the lookout for the most interesting shark MoC posted on the message boards. And whatever MoC that is, that will be featured on a future MoC Spotlight. The next MoC Spotlight, actually. And for those of you who are watching this without early access, you guys already missed out because at this point, it is over. Now let's kick it in gear. I'm gonna tell you guys about my method of reviewing it like I do always, which involves a point system that is based on 3 fundamental attributes: the overall appearance of the MoC, the build of the MoC itself, and the concept and ideas behind the MoC's creation. Okay. Each quality will amount up to 5 points, building up to a final score that will be determined at the end of the episode. So without further ado, let's get it going. Instantly looking at this MoC, I thought, whoa, this is weird. It's like a snake got possessed by some sort of robo-demon. Now really, this is a pretty basic looking MoC with a few neat aesthetics, and it came out looking fairly clean and streamlined. I will say the one thing that did catch my attention first, besides the body shape, was the head, cause it's very weird looking. I mean, let's take a closer look at it, shall we? So obviously it is an upside down skull spider mask, but that kind of gives off quite the interesting look here, making the face look plated. And oh look! It's actually not the face, it's just the mask. Now please put it back on, you look ugly. The mask, as it's supposed to be, is very questionable. How do you see out of that thing? There aren't any eye holes when you're using the skull spider mask like this. I mean, the eye holes are up top, but why would you want to look up there? I mean, that seems a bit counterproductive. I'm not sure how to feel about this head design, but I do like the claws that are sticking out of the top. I like that look it gives. I also like how the claws are being used on the shoulders here on the body. I really like seeing these pieces in such use. While the front of the torso isn't exactly the most interesting looking, it's fairly simple, looks all clean. The back starts to look a bit more complicated. It's a bit offsetting to look at the back because it's so exposed compared to the rest of this MoC. Well, I guess so is the tail. But the first impression I got from looking at this MoC in the first place was that, wow, it's very well armored. It looks like there's plating all over the place. Then we look at the back, and where the back of the neck is fairly exposed. And oh, what's this right here? Is this a backup mask? Anyway, speaking of exposed, I mentioned earlier that the tail was exposed as well, and that's because it is. You look at the tail, it's practically covered in red plating. But see, here's one of those quirks about working with CCBS, is that when you use this system, oftentimes you'll find yourself with exposed bone pieces, even if you do put plating on them. If you look at the back of the bone piece, where the armor plating is attached to it, you'll still see the black bone, and it looks a bit odd, and especially on this MoC, it kind of messes up the cohesion, but I guess that's more of a flaw with the system rather than the design. But I guess it could be said that if this guy tried something else, some other type of method to make this tail, it wouldn't have this flaw. But I'll give him the benefit of the doubt since it seems he wanted to stay fairly conservative about this. I mean, hey, not everybody has like a buttload of pieces that they can just throw into any MoC, you know what I mean? Some of us just have to work with what we have. So anyway, let's look at the build. Now as far as the build goes, it looks really solid, but there isn't all too much to really comment on since this is pretty much based on the simple snap-on function of the CCBS system. There isn't a whole lot new here aside from the torso build, which I can tell is very well engineered, really well structured, keeps that torso from falling all over the place. Everything else is really basic CCBS usage, And it's not a bad thing, the MoC looks pretty good, and I'm really impressed at the fact that this MoC could even stand up like this, in this sort of pose. That's really cool. I'm not sure if I've seen anything like that, but then again, I'm not sure if I've seen another MoC like this before either, looking like it came out of freak mythology. But if there's one thing that I have to comment on about this MoC's build, is that I hope that that skull spider mask on this lower part of the torso, or the silver, I guess this whole thing is really a torso, and this is his whole body right here. It's not just a torso and a tail. No, it's supposed to be like part snake or whatever. Anyway, the skull spider mask back here, I hope that stays on fairly well, because I know that can be a bit tricky with that clip-on system, which I do enjoy seeing its usage on MoCs for other purposes besides a face. And then of course there's this exposure of parts on the back of the torso that could have been covered up if you used a different piece. Maybe some sort of armor piece that could have gone over that. I'm not sure. But yeah, that's about it. Pretty underwhelming here. Again, not bad, but not the most intriguing either. Now let's move on to the concepts. Wow, that was fast. So the big idea behind this MoC is that the creator wanted to build a part snake MoC just because of reasons. Now, snakes in general are an interesting thing to create out of Lego parts because it seems a bit challenging to engineer that kind of body out of Lego parts. I mean, obviously it would involve a bit of repetition, but how interesting could you make such a MoC with such repetition? I mean, could you give it good colors? Could you give it some sort of crazy build that looks complex as all beans? Could you maybe make it look like a hybrid? And that's what this MoC did. He didn't make a dedicated snake. He did mention that he wanted to make some sort of half snake. I guess kind of like Medusa or something. I mean, that's the impression I got when I first looked at it. And while the build isn't exactly the most enticing, for a MoC that is based on the snake, this is still very interesting looking. It's still very unique. It's got a unique face and a unique weapon, but most importantly, a very unique body shape. Because nowadays you see a lot of humanoid MoCs, and those are cool and all, but this is probably one of the more interesting looking ones I've seen lately, because it's not completely humanoid. I think that's a cool idea, mixing up the humanoid norm with something like a snake. And the builder did a pretty decent job executing his idea, but in a very simple manner. It would have been cool to see this built more intricately, or maybe even bigger. And I don't mean humongous, like all the crazy Titan MoCs that are out there right now. I mean maybe just a little bit bigger to make room for more parts, to make the build look a bit more interesting, or maybe even make the appearance a bit more interesting, because you could fit more parts on there for aesthetic. And so with that said, let's move on to the final scores. So this MoC, in terms of appearance, receives a 3 out of 5. It's pretty okay. It's not bad looking. As I mentioned already, it's really unique. I don't see too many MoCs like this out there. That head design is very unique. I don't exactly know how to feel about it, but it's unique, I'll give you that. But the thing is, this MoC doesn't have too many unique features like the head to really merit a higher score. As far as the build goes, it's a bit similar. 3.5 out of 5. The build isn't exactly the most interesting either, but it is nice and solid, and it does its job keeping the MoC together, especially for such an interesting body build. But again, my only thing is that there isn't a whole lot to the build of this MoC. It's just your very basic usage of CCBS, where you snap on the shell to a bone piece and you just do that over and over again until you get something that looks cool. It's not a bad thing, but I would have liked to have seen a more creative usage of this system, kind of like how it is in the torso. That's some pretty cool engineering there. And then the concept and ideas behind the creation of this thing straight out of freak mythology receive a 3.5 out of 5 as well. It's a pretty simple idea, make some sort of snake hybrid, but it was done in a very simple creation. And I've already mentioned in my criticism on the appearance and the build of this MoC that it could have been a bit more interesting, both aesthetically and structurally. It's not a bad MoC by any means, but there was potential to make something a lot better. And with that, the final score is a 10 out of 15. You did pretty okay, Dagarak the Melon Knight. Definitely a good enough job to be featured on the spotlight, I think. But I think for your next creation, maybe you should consider more creative options in executing your ideas. Thank you all for watching. Be sure to rate, comment, subscribe. If you would like a high possibility of being featured on the MoC Spotlight, post your creations to our message boards under the LEGO Creations category. The link is in the description below, board.ttvpodcast.com. And for those of you participating in the Shark Week challenge that I proposed in our last episode, good luck. I really hope to see some really interesting entries. In fact, I really hope to see entries at all. Again, if you're watching this under early access, you have one more week to create a shark MoC that could be featured on the next MoC Spotlight if I deem it more interesting than the others. I haven't seen all too many so far, but that just gives you guys a higher chance. So, yeah, that's all I have to say. Goodbye.